It was an unpleasantly warm morning, and the thick, black shade of an umbrella tree made queer neighbors as the jungle circuit could produce.
Old Man Curry found the shade first and felt that he was entitled to it by right of discovery. Consequently, he did not move when Henry M. Pitkin signified an intention of sharing the coolness with him. Old Man Curry had less than a bowing acquaintance with Pitkin, wished to know him no better, and had disliked him from the moment he had first seen him. "Hot, ain't it?" asked the newcomer by way of making a little talk.
"What you reading, Curry?"
Old Man Curry looked up from the 13th chapter of Proverbs, ceased chewing his straw, and regarded Pitkin with a grave and appraising interest which held something of disapproval, something of insult.
Pitkin's eyes shifted.
"It says here," remarked the aged horseman, "a righteous man hateth lying, but a wicked man is loathsome, and cometh to shame."
"Fair enough," said Pitkin, "and serves him right. He ought to come to shame. Pretty hot for this time of year." "It'll be hotter for some folks by and by." Pitkin laughed noisily.
"Where do you get that stuff?" he demanded. "I hope I ain't a-going to get it," said Old Man Curry.
"I aim to live so's to miss it."
He lapsed into silence, and the straw began to twitch to the slow grinding motion of his lower jaw. A very stupid man might have seen at a glance that Curry did not wish to be disturbed, but for some reason or other Pitkin felt the need of conversation. "I've been thinking," said he, "that my racing colors are too plain: yellow jacket, white sleeves, white cap."
"There's so many yellows and whites that people get 'em mixed up."
"How would it do if I put a design on the back of the jacket, something that would tell people at a glance that the horse was from the Pitkin stable?" Old Man Curry closed his book. "You want 'em to know which is your hosses?" he asked.
"Is that the idea?"
"Sure," answered Pitkin. "I was trying to think up a design of some kind.
Lucky Baldwin used to have a Maltese cross.
How would it do if I had a rooster or a rising sun or a crescent sewed onto the back of the jacket?" Old Man Curry pretended to give serious thought to the problem.
"Roosters and rising suns don't mean anything," said he judicially.
"An emblem ought to mean something to the public, it ought to stand for something."
"Yes," said Pitkin, "but what can I get that will sort of identify me and my horses?"
"Well," said the old man, "meb I can suggest a design that'll fill the bill." He picked up a bit of shingle and drew a pencil from his pocket.
"How would this do?"
"2 straight marks this way, Pitkin, and 2 straight marks that way, and nobody'd ever mistake your hosses, nobody that's been watchin' the way they run."
Pitkin craned his neck and snorted with wrath.
Old Man Curry had drawn 2 crosses side by side, and the inference was plain.
"That's your notion, is it?" said he, rising.
"Well, one thing is a mortal cinch, Curry, you'll never catch me psalm singing round a racetrack, and any time I want to preach, I'll hire a church."
"Put that in your pipe and smoke it."
"I ain't smokin', thankee, I'm chewin' mostly," remarked the old gentleman to Pitkin's vanishing coattails.
"Well, now, looks like I made him sort of angry. What is it that Solomon wrote 'bout the anger of a fool?"
"They used to say that the meanest man in the world was the mean man from Maine, but this is a slander on the good old Pine Tree State, for Henry M. Pitkin never was east of the Mississippi River in his life. He claimed Iowa as his native soil, and all that Iowa could do about it was to issue a warrant for his arrest on a charge connected with the misappropriation of funds. Young Mr. Pitkin escaped over the state line westward, beating the said warrant in a whipping finish, and after a devious career covering many years in many states he turned up on the jungle circuit, bringing with him a string of horses, a gentle, soft-spoken old Negro trainer, an Irish jockey named Mulligan, and 2 stable hands, each as black as the ace of spades. The jungle circuit has always been peculiarly rich in catch-as-catch-can burglars and daylight highwaymen, but after they had studied Mr. Pitkin's system closely, these gentlemen refused to enter into a protective alliance with him, for, as Grouchy O'Connor remarked, the sucker hadn't never heard that there ought to be honor among thieves. Pitkin would shear a black sheep as close to the shivering hide as he would shear a white one, and the horses of the Pitkin stable performed according to price, according to investment, according to orders, according to everything in the world but agreement, racing form, and honest endeavor. In ways that are dark and tricks that are vain, the heathen Chinny at the top of his heathenish bent would have been no match for Mr. Henry M. Pitkin, who could have taken the shirt away from a Chinese river pirate. The double-cross would have been an excellent racing trademark for the Pitkin stable, because Pitkin had double-crossed everyone who ever trusted him, everyone with whom he had come in contact. He had even double-crossed old Gabe Johnson, his Negro trainer, and the history of that cross will furnish an accurate index on the smallness of Pitkin's soul. How such a decent old darky as Uncle Gabe ever came to be associated with white trash of the Pitkin variety is another and longer story. It is enough to say that Pitkin hired the old man when he was hungry and thereafter frequently reminded him of that fact. They had been together for 3 years when they came to the jungle circuit, Pitkin rat-eyed, furtive, mysterious as a crow, and scheming always for his own pocket, Uncle Gabe quiet, efficient, inclined to be religious, knowing his place and keeping it and attending strictly to business, namely, the conditioning of the Pitkin horses for the track. Uncle Gabe treated all white men with scrupulous respect, even touching his hat brim every time Pitkin spoke to him. He was a real trainer of a school fast passing away, and at rare intervals he spoke of the quality folks down yonder for whom he had handled thoroughbreds, glimpses of his history which made his present occupation seem all the stranger by contrast. Some of the horsemen of the jungle circuit pretended to believe that Pitkin kept a Negro trainer because he was too mean to get along with a white man, but this was only partly true. He kept Gabe because he had a keen appreciation of the old man's knowledge of horseflesh, and in addition to this Gabe was cheap at the price, $50 a month and his board, and only part of that 50 paid, for it hurt Pitkin to part with money under any circumstances. It was by skipping paydays that he came to owe Uncle Gabe the not unimportant sum of $500, and it was by trying to collect this amount that the aged trainer became also the owner of a racehorse. Pitkin, in the course of business dealings with a small breeding farm, had picked up 2 bay colts. They were as like as 2 peas with every honest right to the resemblance, for they were half-brothers by the same sire, and there was barely a week's difference in their ages. Uncle Gabe looked the baby racers over very carefully before giving it as his opinion that no twins were ever more alike in appearance. "They own mammies would have a li'l trouble tellin' them colts apart," said the Negro.
"Can you tell them apart?" asked Pitkin. Gabe grinned. "Yes, Sue," he answered. "They is a difference." Pitkin looked at Gabe sharply. He knew that the old Negro felt one colt to be better than the other. "All right then," he said after a moment. "Tell you what I'll do. You've been deviling me for that $500 till I'm sick of listening to you. Take your pick of the 2 colts and call it square. How does that strike you?" Uncle Gabe deliberated for some time. The $500 meant a great deal to him, but the cash value of a debt is regulated somewhat by the sort of man who owes it, and Gabe realized that this point was worthy of consideration. On the other hand, should the colt turn out well, he would be worth several times $500. "Don't wait till you get him in training," said Pitkin. "A blind man could pick the best one then. Take the colt that looks good to you now and let it go at that." That evening Uncle Gabe made his selection and immediately announced that he intended to name his colt General Duval. "Good enough," said Pitkin, "and just to carry out the soldier idea, I'll call the other one Sergeant Smith. Put the general in that end stall, away from the others." The next morning Gabe sent one of the stable hands to get his colt, and when the animal appeared the old trainer's lower lip began to droop, but he said nothing until after he had made a thorough examination. "Boy, you done brought me the wrong colt," said he. "This ain't General Duval." "I got him out in yo stall," said the stable hand. "Don't care where yo got him," persisted Gabe. "This ain't the colt I picked out. He ain't wide enough between the eyes." "What's the argument about?" asked Pitkin, coming from the tackle room. "Gabe say this 'ere ain't his colt," answered the stable hand. "Where did you get him?" demanded Pitkin. "Out'n that stall yonda," said the stable hand, pointing. "That was where you put your colt, wasn't it?" asked Pitkin, turning to Uncle Gabe. "Yes, Sue, I put him there all right, but this ain't him." "Oh, come now," laughed Pitkin, "you've been thinking it over and you're afraid you've picked the wrong one. Be a sport, Gabe, stick with your bargain." "Been some monkey business done round here," muttered the aged Negro. "Been a lil night walkin', Meb. Boy, bring out that Sergeant Smith colt and lemme cast my eye over him once." "See here, nigger," said Pitkin, "I let you have first pick, didn't I? Gave you all the best of it, and you picked this colt here. If you've changed your mind overnight, I can't help that, can I?" "My mind ain't changed none," replied old Gabe, "but this colt, he's changed, Sue." "Who would change him on you, eh? Do you think I'd do it? Is that what you're getting at?" Why, no, Sue, no, but." "Then shut up. You're always beefing about something or other, always kicking. I don't want to hear any more out of you, understand? Shut up." "Yes, Sue," answered old Gabe, touching his hat, "all the same I got a right to my opinion, boss." Whatever his opinion, Gabe proceeded to train the two colts in the usual manner, and before long it was plain to everyone connected with the Pitkin establishment that the striking likeness did not extend to track promise and performance. Sergeant Smith developed into a high-class piece of racing property. General Duval was not worth his oats. Sergeant Smith won some baby races in impressive fashion and was immediately tabbed as a comber and a useful betting tool, but every time General Duval carried the racing colors of Gabriel Johnson cherry jacket, green sleeves, red, white and blue cap, he brought them home powdered with the dust of defeat. Old Gabe made several ineffectual attempts to persuade Pitkin to take the colt back again on any terms, and was laughed at for his pains. "You had your choice, didn't you?" Pitkin would say. "Well, then, you can't blame anybody but yourself. Whose fault is it that I got the good colt and you got the crab? No, Gabe, a bargain's a bargain with me, always. The General's a rotten bad racehorse, but he's yours and not mine. It's what you get for being a poor picker." The bay colts were nearing the end of their 3-year-old form when the Pitkin string arrived on the jungle circuit and took up quarters next door to Old Man Curry and his Bible horses. Sergeant Smith was the star of the stable and the principal money winner, when it suited Pitkin to let him run for the money, while General Duval, as like his half-brother as a reflection in a flawless mirror, had a string of defeats to his discredit and his feed bill was breaking old Gabe's heart. The trainer often looked at General Duval and shook his head. "You and that oathy colt could tell me something if yo could talk," he frequently remarked. After his conversation with Old Man Curry, Pitkin returned to his tackle room in a savage state of mind, and, needing a target for his abuse, selected Mulligan, the Irish jockey. Now, Mulligan was small, but he had the heart of a giant and the courage of one conviction and 2 acquittals on charges of assault and battery. In spite of his size, he could ride at 98 pounds. Mulligan was a man in years, a man who felt that his employer had treated him like a child in money matters, and when Pitkin called him a bow-legged little thief and an Irish ape, he was putting a match to a powder magazine. One retort led to another, and when Mulligan ran out of retorts he responded with a piece of 2x4 scantling which he had been saving for just such an emergency, and Pitkin lost interest in the conversation. Mulligan left him lying on the floor of the tackle room, and though he was in somewhat of a hurry to be gone he found time to say a few words to old Gabe, who was sunning himself at the end of the barn. "And I don't know what you can do about it," concluded the jockey, "but anyway I've put you wise. If they ask you, just say that you don't know which way I went." That night Old Man Curry had a visitor who entered his tackle room, hat in hand and bowing low. "Set down, Gabe," said the old horseman. "How's Pitkin by this time?" "He got a headache," answered Gabe soberly. "Humph," snorted Curry. "Should think he would have. That boy fetched him a pretty solid lick. Glad he didn't hurt him any worse, for the boy's sake, I mean." "Yes, Sue," said Gabe. "Mist' Curry, you been mighty good to me, one way and another, and I'd like to ask you for some advice." "Well," said the old man, "advice is like medicine, Gabe, easy to give but hard to take. What's troubling you now?" "Mist' Curry, yo membe me tellin' yo about that General Duval colt of mine, how he never did look the same to me since I got him?" "Yes," answered Curry, "and I've already told you that you can't prove anything on Pitkin. You may suspect that somebody switched them colts on you, but unless—" "'Scuse me, Sue," interrupted Gabe, "but I got beyond suspectin' it now. I knows it was done." "You don't say?" "Yes, Sue, I got the proof. Mulligan, he say to me just before he lights out, 'Gabe,' he say, 'that Smith colt, he belonged to you by rights. Pitkin, he pulls a switch after yo went to bed that first night. He say he's seen him do it.'" "Meb the boy was just tryin' to stir up a little more trouble," suggested Old Man Curry. "Ain't I told you he never did look the same? Them colts so much alike they had me guessin'. I done picked the one what was whitest between the eyes, and that's the one what been a winnin' all them races. That ain't Sergeant Smith at all, that's my General Duval. Pitkin, he gives me my pick and then he switches on me. Question is, how can I get him back?" Old Man Curry combed his whiskers for some time in silence. "Solomon had a job like this once," said he, "but it was a question of babies. I reckon his decision wouldn't work out with hosses. Gabe, you're gettin' to be quite an old man, ain't you?" "Toliabolol," replied the Negro, "yes, Sue." "And if you got this hoss away from Pitkin, what would you do with him?" "Sell him," was the prompt reply. "Oh ho! Then it ain't the hoss you want so much as the money, eh?" "Mist' Curry, that colt'd fetch enough to send me home right. I got 2 sons in Baltimore, and they been wantin' me to quit the racin' business, but I couldn't quit it broke. No, Sue, I couldn't, so I just been hangin' on tooth and toenail like the sayin' is, hopin' I'd get a stake somehow." "And you don't much care how you quit, so long's you quit, is that it?" "Well, Sue, I don't want no trouble if I kin he pee it, but if I has to fight my way loose from Pitkin I'll do it." There was another long silence while Gabe waited. "I reckon Solomon would have his hands full straightenin' out this tangle," said Old Man Curry at last. "You can't break into the stall and take that hoss away from Pitkin, because he'd have you arrested. And then, of course, he's got him registered in his name and runnin' in his colors, that's another thing we've got to take into consideration. I reckon we better set quiet a few days and study. You'll know whenever the sergeant hoss is entered in a race, won't you?" "Yes, Sue, I'm bound to know ahead o' time, Sue." "All right. Go on back to work and don't quarrel with Pitkin.
Don't let him know that you found out anything, and keep me posted on Sergeant Smith. Might be a good thing if we knew when Pitkin is going to bet on him. He's been cheatin' with that hoss lately. He's always cheatin', Sue. Yo think there's a way to.
There's always a way, Gabe, answered Old Man Curry.
The main thing is to find it.
That's my hoss by right, said the Negro, with a trace of stubbornness in his tone. And the world is your oyster, responded Curry, but you can't go bustin' into it with dynamite. You got to open an oyster, careful.
Now go on back to your barn and do as I tell you. Understand? Yes, Sue, and thank you, Kinley, Sue.
Pitkin's bandaged head brought him little sympathy. In fact, the general opinion seemed to be that Mulligan had not hit him quite hard enough to do the community any good. Certainly the scandling did not improve his temper, and Pitkin made life a burden to old Gabe and the two black stable hands. Gabe swallowed the abuse with a patient smile, but the two roustabouts muttered to themselves and eyed their employer with malevolence. They had also been missing paydays.
One evening Pitkin stuck his head out of the door of the tackle room and called for his trainer. Gabe. Oh, Gabe. Now where is that good-for-nothing old nigger?
Comin', Sue, comin', answered Gabe, shuffling along the line of stalls.
Yo want to see me, boss? Shut the door behind you, growled Pitkin.
I was thinking it was about time we cut this Sergeant Smith colt loose.
Yes, Sue, answered Gabe. He's ready to go, boss.
How good is he? Demanded Pitkin.
Well, Sue, replied Gabe, he's a heap better'n what he's been showin' lately, that's a fact.
Can he beat horses like Callaway and Hartshorn?
He kin if he gets a chance. How do you mean, a chance?
Well, Sue, if he gets a good, hones ride, for one thing. He been messed all over the racetrack loss few times out.
But with a good ride you think he can win? Humph, sniffed Gabe. He leave 'em like they standin' still.
I want to slip him into the fourth race next Saturday, said Pitkin, and he'll have Callaway and Hartshorn to beat. There ought to be a nice price on him, 4 or 5 to 1, anyway, on account of what he's been showing lately.
Yo go and bet on him, Sue?
Straight in place, said Pitkin, but I won't bet a nickel here at the track.
They'll be asking you about the colt and trying to get a line on him.
You tell him that I'm starting him a little bit out of his class just to see if he's game. Any lie will do.
And if they ask you about the stable money, we're not playing him this time. Yes, Sue. You're absolutely sure he's ready? Ready? Why, boss, ain't yo been watchin' the way that colt is workin'? Yo kin bet 'em till they quit stocking it and not be scared.
That's all I want to know, Gabe, and mind what I told you about keeping that big mouth of yours shut.
If I hear of any talk. I ain't never talked yet, has I?
Well, don't pick this time to start, that's all. That night the lights burned late in 2 tackle rooms. In one of them Old Man Curry was bringing the Judgment of Solomon down to date and fitting it to turf conditions. In the other Henry M. Pitkin was preparing code telegrams to certain business associates in Seattle, Portland, Butte, and San Francisco, for this was in the unregenerate days when pool rooms operated more or less openly in the West. Mr. Pitkin was getting ready for the annual cleanup. The next morning he was on hand early enough to see General Duval return from an exercise gallop, and there was a small black boy on the colt's back.
Come here, Gabe, said Pitkin. Ain't that Curry's nigger jockey? Yes, Sue, that's Jockey Mosby Jones, Sue. What's he doing around this stable? He kinda gettin' acquainted with the Gen-L, Sue. Acquainted? What for? Well, Sue, they's a maiden race next Saturday, and I was thinkin' meb the Gen-L could win it if he gets a good ride. Jockey Jones didn't have no oathy engagement, Sue, so I done hired him afo the Cass Ion. Oh, you did you?
Now listen to me, Gabe, I don't want anybody from the Curry stable hanging around this place.
Chances are this little nigger will be trying to pick up an earful to carry back to his boss, the psalm-singing old hypocrite. If Curry should find out we're leveling with Sergeant Smith next Saturday, he might go into the ring and hurt the price. I can't stop you putting the little nigger on your own horse, but if he tries to make my barn a hangout, I'll warm his jacket for him, understand? You can tell him so. Yes, Sue, answered Gabe meekly. Mist Curry and yo bad friends, boss?
We ain't any kind of friends, snapped Pitkin, and that goes for every blackbird that eats out of his hand.
I thought he was a pious old gentleman, said Gabe.
He's got a lot of people fooled, Curry has, replied Pitkin with unnecessary profanity, but I've had his number right along. He's a crook, but he gets away with it on account of that long-tailed coat, the sanctimonious old scoundrel.
Don't you have anything to do with him, Gabe? Me, said Gabe, professing mild astonishment. Humph. I reckon not.
Always stick with your friends, said Pitkin, and remember which side your bread is buttered on.
That's what I mean to do, Sue. Yo no, boss, I sort of figure the Gen-L's got a mighty good chance next Saturday in that second race. A mighty good chance. Pitkin sneered. Going to bet on him, are you?
No, Sue, not less some people pay me what they owes me.
You'd only blow it in if you had it, replied Pitkin. The General's a darn bad racehorse, always was and always will be.
They ain't nothin' in that race for him to beat, responded Gabe.
He's never had anything to beat yet, said Pitkin, and he's still a maiden, ain't he?
Better let him run for the purse, Gabe.
Playing a horse like that is just throwing good money after bad. Meb yo right, boss, answered the old Negro. Meb yo right, but I still thinks he's got a chance.
Now, in a maiden race every horse is supposed to have a chance, not a particularly robust one, of course, but still a chance. The maidens are the horses which have never won a race, and every jungle circuit is well supplied with these equine misfits. They graduate, one at a time, from their lowly state, and the owner is indeed fortunate who wins enough to cover the cost of probation. The betting on a maiden race is seldom heavy, but always sporadic enough to prove the truth of the old saw about the hope which springs eternal.
Saturday's maiden race was no exception. There was a sizzling paddock tip on the Cricket, a nervous brown mare which had twice finished second at the meeting, the last time missing her graduation by a nose. Others had heard that Athelstan was trying. There was a rumor that Laredo was about to annex his first brackets. Suspicion pointed to Miller Boy as likely to do something, but nobody had heard any good news of General Duval. Those who looked him up in the form charts found his previous races sufficiently disgraceful. The Cricket opened favorite at 8-5, and when her owner heard this he grunted deep and soulfully and swore by all his gods that the price was too short and the mare a false favorite. He had hoped for not less than 4-1, in which case he would have sent the mare out to win, carrying a few $100s of ill-gotten gains as wagers, but at 8-5 tickets on the Cricket had no value save as souvenirs of a sad occasion. Nobody bothered about General Duval. Nobody questioned old Gabe as he led a blanketed horse round and round the paddock stalls. Old man Curry sat on the fence, thoughtfully chewing fine-cut tobacco and seemingly taking no interest in his surroundings,
but he saw Pitkin as soon as that fox-faced gentleman entered the paddock, and thereafter he watched the disciple of the double-cross closely. It was plain that Pitkin's visit had no business significance. He was not the sort of man to play a maiden race, and after a few bantering remarks addressed to old Gabe he drifted back into the betting ring, where he made a casual note of the fact that on most of the slates General Duval was quoted at 40-1.
"Anybody betting on the nigger skate?" asked Pitkin of a black man whom he knew.
"Not a soul," was the reply.
"What does the old fool start him for?"
"Because that's what he is, an old fool," answered Pitkin briefly as he moved away. When the first bookmaker chalked up 50-1 on the General, a bulky, flat-footed Negro, dressed in a screaming plaid suit with an ancient straw hat tilted sportively over one eye, fished a wrinkled $2 bill out of his vest pocket, and bet it on Gabriel Johnson's horse.
"You like that one, do you?" grinned the bookmaker.
"No, Sue, not specially," chuckled the Negro, "but I sutney likes that long price." Soon there was more 50-1 in sight, and the flat-footed Negro began to shuffle about the betting ring, bringing to light other wrinkled $2 bills. The bookmakers were glad to take in a few dollars on General Duval, if for no other reason than to round out their sheets. The flat-footed Negro continued to bet until he arrived at the bottom of his vest pocket, and then he began to draw upon a fund concealed in the fob pocket of his trousers. When the first bugle call sounded he was betting from the right hip and never more than $2 at a time. Jockey Mosby Jones, gorgeous as a tropical butterfly in the cherry jacket with green sleeves and the red, white and blue cap, pranced into General Duval's paddock stall and listened intently as old Gabe bent over him. "Yo ain't forgot what we told yo last night, son?" asked Gabe in anxious tones.
"Ain't forgot nothin'," was the sober answer.
"'Cause everything 'pend on how it look."
"Aha," replied Little Mose. "I make it look all right."
"This hoss, he might take a notion to run off and leave him soon as the barrier go up," cautioned Gabe.
"Keep him folded up in yo lap to the last minute. And then set him down," supplemented Mose.
"Yo just be watchin' me, that's all."
"Lot of folks'll be watchin' yo," warned Gabe. "Them judges, they goin' be watchin' yo. Remember, it got to look right."
As Jockey Jones passed out of the paddock he clucked to his mount and glanced over toward the fence where Old Man Curry was still sitting.
"Hoss," whispered Little Mose, "did yo see that?" The old man winked at us.
There must have been some truth in the rumor concerning Laredo, for he rushed to the front when the barrier rose, with Miller Boy and Athelstan in hot pursuit. As for the cricket, she was all but left at the post, and her owner remarked to himself that he'd teach em when to make his mare a false favorite. The three people most interested in the cherry jacket with the green sleeves watched it go bobbing along the rails several lengths behind the leaders, and were relieved to find it there instead of out in front. Had the judges been watching the bay colt they could not have helped noticing that his mouth was wide open, due to a powerful pull on the reins, and they might have drawn certain conclusions from this, but they were watching the cricket instead and mentally putting a rod in pickle for the owner of the favorite. Laredo led around the turn and into the stretch with Miller Boy and Athelstan crowding him hard, but the pace was beginning to tell on the front runners, and the rear guard was closing in on them, headed by the cherry jacket. "It's anybody's race," remarked the presiding judge as he squinted up the stretch. "Lord, what a lot of beetles."
"Yes, they're rotten," said the associate judge. "Laredo's quitting already. Now, then, you hounds, come on. Whose turn is it today?"
The maidens came floundering down to the wire spread out like a cavalry charge and covering half the track. At the 16th pole a bold man would have hesitated to pick the winner. Indeed, it looked to be anybody's race, with the sole exception of the cricket, sulking far in the rear. It was Gabe Johnson who saw that the wraps were still about Mose's wrists, but it was Old Man Curry who chuckled to himself as the horses passed the paddock gate, and it was Shanghai, Curry's Negro hostler, who began to count tickets on General Duval. "The old nigger's horse is going to be there or thereabouts today," commented the presiding judge. "Just about there or thereabouts. Keep your eye on him, Ed, there he is on the inside. Darn these spread eagle finishes. They always look bad from angle." 30 yards away from home a single length separated the first 5 horses, and the 5th horse carried the racing colors of Gabriel Johnson. It was cutting it fine, very fine, but Little Mose had an excellent eye for distance. He felt the strength of the mount under him and timed his closing rush to the fraction of a second. Those who were yelling wildly for Athelstan, Miller Boy, and the others saw a flash of cherry jacket on the rail, caught a glimpse of a bullet-headed little Negro hurling himself forward in the stirrups, and the race was over. Jockey Mosby Jones had brought a despised outsider home a winner by half a length. There was a stunned silence as the numbers dropped into place, broken only by one terrific whoop from Shanghai, betting commissioner. "Well," said the associate judge, looking at his chief, "what do you make of that? The winner had a lot left, didn't he? Think the old nigger has been cheating with him?" The presiding judge rubbed his chin. "No, Ed, I reckon not," said he. "It was a poor race, run in slow time. And we've got to figure that the change of jockeys would make a difference. This Jones is a better boy than Duval is used to. I reckon it's all right, and I'm glad the old nigger finally won a race. The cricket would have walked home if she'd got away good," said the associate judge. "Have to look into that business," said the other. "Well, I'm glad the old darky finally put one over." Many people seemed glad of it, even Mr. Pitkin, who slapped Gabe on the back as he led the winner from the ring. "Didn't see the race, I was down getting another drink, but they tell me the general just lucked in on the last jump. Everything dead in front of him, eh?" "Yes, Sue," answered Gabe, passing the halter to one of the black stable hands. "It did look like he win lucky, that's a FAC. "Well, don't go to celebrating and overlook that 4th race," ordered Pitkin. "No gin now. You bring Sergeant Smith over to the paddock yourself." "Yes, Sue, boss. And if anybody asks you about him, he's only in there for a tryout." "Just for a tryout, yes, Sue." To such as were simple enough to expect a crooked man to return straight answers to foolish questions, Pitkin stated, 1. That he was not betting a plugged nickel on his colt, 2. That he hardly figured to have a chance with such horses as Callaway and Hartshorn, 3. That he might possibly be third if he got the best of the breaks, and 4. That he had lost his regular jockey and was forced to give the mount to a bad little boy about whom he knew nothing. The real truth he uncovered to Jockey Shea, a freckled young savage who had taken up the burden where Mulligan laid it down. "Listen, kid, and don't make any mistakes with this colt. I'm down on him hook, line, and sinker to win in place, so give him a nice ride and I'll declare you in with a piece of the dough." "Eh? Never you mind, it'll be enough. Now, then, this is a mile race, and Callaway will go out in front, he always does. Lay in behind him and stay there till you get to the head of the stretch, then shake up the colt and come on with him. He can stand a long, hard drive under whip and spur, so give it to him good and plenty from the quarter pole home. Don't try to draw a close finish, win just as far as you can with him, because Hartshorn will be coming from behind." This was the race as programmed, this was the Pitkin annual cleanup as planned. Imagine, then, Pitkin's sheer, dumb amazement at the spectacle of Shea, going to the bat at the rise of the barrier in order to keep his mount within striking distance of the tail end of the procession. Imagine his wrath as the colt continued to lag in last place, losing ground in spite of the savage punishment administered by Shea. Imagine his sensations when he thought of the Pitkin bankroll, scattered in all the pool rooms between Seattle and San Francisco, tossed to the winds, burned up, gone forever, bet on a colt that would not or could not make a respectable fight for it. Let us drop the curtain over the rest of the race. Hartshorn won it in a neck-and-neck drive with Callaway just as Shea was flogging the bay colt past the 16th pole, and we will lift the curtain again at the point where the judges summoned Pitkin into the stand to ask him for an explanation of Sergeant Smith's pitiful showing. "Now, sir," said the presiding judge, "we've been pretty lenient with you, Mr. Pitkin. We've overlooked a lot of things that we didn't like, a lot of things. I figured this colt to have a fair chance to win today, or be in the money at least. He ran like a cow. How do you account for that?" "Why, judges," stammered Pitkin, I don't account for it. I can't account for it. The colt's been working good, and you thought he had a chance, did you?" "Why sure, judges, and I." "Well, then, why did you tell your friends that the colt was only in for a tryout? How about that?" I didn't want him spoiling the price. I mean, judges, I didn't think it was anybody's business." "Oh, so you bet on him, did you? Let's see the tickets." And of course Mr. Pitkin had no tickets to show. He offered to produce copies of telegrams, but the judges had him exactly where they had been wanting to get him, and they gave him a very unhappy 10 minutes. At the end of this period, the presiding judge cleared his throat and pronounced sentence. "Your entries are refused from now on, and you are warned off this track. Take your horses somewhere else, sir, and don't ever bring him back here. That's all." To Pitkin it seemed enough. He walked down the steps in a daze and wandered away in the general direction of his stable. He was still in a daze when he reached his destination, and the first thing he saw was old Gabe, his coat on and a satchel in his hand. "Oh, you've heard about it already, have you?" asked Pitkin dully. "Heard what?" And Gabe did not touch the brim of his hat. "We've got the gate, been warned off, entries refused." "Glory," ejaculated the aged trainer. "Time they was gettin' onto you." "What's that?" shouted Pitkin. "Why, you black hound, I'll—" "Yo won't do nothin'," said Gabe stoutly. "Pitkin, yo and me is through, yo and me is done. Yo made me all the trouble yo eve go and make. Next time they catches yo cheatin' on a racetrack, I hopes they shoot yo head off." Old Gabe walked away toward the curry barn, and all Pitkin could do was stare after him. Then he sat down on a bale of hay and took stock of his misfortunes. "I reckon everything's all right, Gabe," said Old Man Curry, who was counting money in his tackle room. "It was sort o' risky. When a man can't tell his own hoss when he sees him, anything is liable to happen to him on a bush track. I just cut this bankroll in two, Gabe, and here's your bit. Shanghai's a good bettin' commissioner, eh?" Old Gabe's eyes bulged as he contemplated the size of his fortune. "All this, Sue, mine?" "All yours, and you better not miss that 6 o'clock train. Never can tell what'll happen, you know, Gabe. Pitkin will keep General Duval, I reckon." Gabe grinned from ear to ear. "I forgot to tell him so," he chuckled, "but he got both them hosses now. Mist' Curry, what yo reckon Solomon would say 'bout us?" "The Lord will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famish," quoted the horseman, "but he casteth away the substance of the wicked." "Amen," said old Gabe. "And a fine job o' castin' away been done this evenin'. Mist' Curry, I'm quit hoss racin' now, but you're the whitest man I met in all my time." "Go way with you," laughed Curry. It was one of the black stable hands who recalled Pitkin to a sense of his responsibilities. The roustabout approached, leading a bay colt.
"Boss, is Gabe done quit us?"
"Huh," grunted Pitkin, emerging from a deep brown study.
"Yes, he's gone, confound him."
"Well, he left this 'ere General Duval hoss behin' him. The General's cooled out now. What you want me to do with him?"
"Put him in his stall," mumbled Pitkin.
"Tomorrow I'll see if I can get rid of him."
It is a very stupid racehorse which does not know its own stall.
The stable hand released his hold on the halter and slapped the colt's flank.
"Glong with yo," said he.
Then, and not until then, did Henry M. Pitkin begin to estimate his misfortune correctly, for the bay colt which had won the maiden race in the name of General Duval and carried the racing colors of Gabriel Johnson to their first and only victory marched straight into Sergeant Smith's stall and thrust his muzzle into Sergeant Smith's feed box.